Hi, welcome back to the Valley Mills Christian Church podcast. I'm Joe McNeil, the spiritual growth coordinator.
I'm Ezra Davis, the student minister.
And I'm Mark Stair, the worship minister.
Today we're going to confront you about some things because we feel that you need to be confronted.
Yes.
So get ready to be confronted.
Buckle in, boys and girls.
Anyway, no, we're not going to talk about confronting you. We're going to talk about confrontation a little bit. So today is voting day.
I voted, Joe.
I voted. I can't
Mark,
remember which part of my chest
Mark
the sticker was.
didn't vote. My stickers
Going
are
to.
here.
Going to.
Are you going to vote?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes. It is my civil duty.
It is.
Yeah.
As a U.S. citizen.
So let's get this out of the way first of all.
Who'd you vote for? Just kidding. Just kidding.
Just
kidding.
I voted for Donald Duck.
Oh.
So here, in all seriousness, on behalf of every sane and normal person, and some of the weird ones too, if you don't vote, please don't gripe about politics because you don't really have a right to. I said it. There it is. On behalf of everyone. You've heard it. You've probably done it. Perhaps. But you should go vote. It is your civic duty. And it's important to make sure that your voice is heard and that you are stood and counted for. So
if you listen to that, Mark, Joe just said that if we vote, we get the bellyache.
yeah, I mean, you can.
You can.
If you want to. If you really, really want
So
to.
this
don't need
podcast
to,
is
but-
going to be bellyache.
So we are going to talk about confrontation and letting your voice be heard and standing up and just kind of voting as a segue to what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
It's important in Christendom to make sure that you are holding other people accountable to an extent. So I think, and I want to start this off by saying that too many times there are a lot of people who, as A.W. Tozer, the great Christian author, once said, thinks that we are God's foreman and they're down here to make sure everybody's minding their P's and Q's. And I don't, that's obviously a wrong way of thinking. God doesn't want us judging, running around. And there are times where God's going to want us to step in and say or do or act. If you want some supporting scripture here, Jesus was talking to some people here about this very subject here in Matthew 18, verse 15 through 20. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. So that part right there, you have won them over. I think that should be your objective. It isn't to prove that you were right and they were wrong. It is to win them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Now, this is funny because a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, man, you should treat them like dirt because nobody likes pagans or tax collectors. But who was it that Jesus would frequently dine with? Was it tax collectors?
and
That's
pagans.
weird.
Zacchaeus.
And
That's odd.
Outcasts, fishermen, average Joes.
So they take that scripture way out of context, I think, where they're like, well, Jesus says right here, I should treat them like dirt. No, you shouldn't. You should treat them as someone who really needs Jesus. Anyway, truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or more gather in my name, there I am with them. So that sets up quite a lot, I think, and what we're going to talk about here too, because confrontation is a part of everyday life, whether you're a person who confronts people pretty casually or it's really hard for you to kind of muster up the gumption or whatever you want to call it to confront people. So, but there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. But we'll start first, I think, with some anecdotes here. Some times where maybe you've either confronted someone that you felt led to, or maybe you confronted someone when you really, really possibly shouldn't have. But Mark, do you have something for us first?
Yeah, I'll start off with an example of when, or the confrontation wasn't done exactly the right way. I think I've learned from that experience. It was about election time, 2016. So at college,
Hard.
and it was hard for me as being in that atmosphere, because whatever you said that kind of challenged their views, they kind of pulled the card where they're more educated than you, or they're more Joe's told me this, that they're more like evolved than you. They take on that kind of arrogant kind of persona that it definitely rubs me the wrong way, and I think it rubs a lot of other people the wrong way.
It's a heightened sense of self
Yes.
that a lot of scholars take on. And it's one thing to be proud of your accomplishments academically, but it's another thing to think that you're better than everybody.
Or just think you have all the right answers.
Yeah.
And I think I'm kind of guilty of that in a way, because I think when I was confronted with these things, or these things kind of happened, I felt like I almost had to take like a hard stand, to draw the line in the sand and be like, this isn't fair. Like, this is not right. And there's a lot of people who don't think along the same lines that you do, or have the same ideas about the things you do. And what you're doing is you're trying to intimidate them, or trying to coerce them into your way of thinking. And this happens, I've seen it in the classroom with professors stating their ideas, and more often than not, it was in my Bible classes, which is very interesting to me. I know that whenever I would speak up and say something, and I know here that this is kind of safe to say on this podcast, is I know where Valley Mills stands on this issue is homosexuality, and it's not really where the church stands. I believe it's where God stands, and what the Bible says on homosexuality, that it's a sin. Now, I'm not saying we should go and hate on these people or treat them like they're dirt, just like Joe mentioned earlier before, that we should love them and actually spend time with them so that we can win them over, because everybody needs Jesus. Everybody needs hope of salvation. But once I spoke up in that class about homosexuality being a sin, like, it's almost like everybody just kind of jumped on that, like kind of just the tone in the room kind of got kind of awkward, because it's like, man, how could you kind of like disrupt the peace in here, a little bit? Like, it wasn't like an all out, like,
you've pointed out the emperor's new clothes are really not clothes at all.
Yeah. It wasn't like hostile or anything, but there are people asking, or like telling me what their views are and how they view it as, not a sin, or their interpretation on the Bible is a little bit different. And I heard a bunch of stories of them saying, "Oh, but they're really good people. How could you, ruin, want to ruin their happiness and everything?" But then, I mean, it's
as if being a Christian were like the fun police.
Yeah,
and all we're trying to do is ruin everyone's fun.
Mm-hmm. But what I made sure to do, I guess in that instance, it wasn't really a bad confrontation. It was just more of one of those times where I think it's needed, because in college and any place of learning, wherever, people need to hear different points of view. And I think that there's only one side and one agenda in that class. So I deemed that kind of time appropriate to kind of challenge the ideas that were in there. So I think that's one appropriate time of doing it. Now, a time where I didn't do it so well probably was they have chapel speakers, and a lot of the chapel speakers, and just again, the agenda there was leaning one way. And I know I was told it's good to, bring in new ideas and to open people's minds, which I agree with. But yes, have people on the left and the middle come in, but have people on the right come in, have people, anywhere in between come in. Don't just have one type of people coming in.
Mob opinion.
Exactly. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm not against hearing different points of view, but I am against just the kind of the mindset about we're just going to brainwash, in a sense, these people that may be leaning on the fence, because a lot of young people don't know where to
lean. Or they
lean.
may not have even ever been made aware that there's another option, and they've been bullied into believing a certain thing because, well, if you don't, then you're racist, or you're a bigot, or et cetera, et cetera.
And I remember that a lot of people that were my friends, and a lot of people that weren't my friends, actually hated that specific time that year of all the political talk and the chapels it's supposed to be about preaching the gospel and everything like that, talking about, from the Bible, and it just wasn't that.
Which I do agree with. I really feel like there shouldn't be a whole lot of political discourse in church.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one thing if there is a Christian politician out there, if you want to like casually mention your support in your own personal life, but I think that from a ministerial standpoint, I don't know, I take the token of like, give to Caesar's what Caesar's, like we don't, this isn't our objective, so it doesn't really, it's kind of a non-issue.
Well, it's kind of like if you talk about politics from the pulpit or from the teaching platform in the church, it kind of segregates the whole picture of what you're trying to do, because that's going to be a hot topic nowadays. So if you go in going, well, I think this candidate versus this candidate is better, then that there's going to be very varying opinions. And if that is making somebody angry, or I'm not saying like you need to shy away from confrontation, but if your main goal is to be evangelistic on some, on those points, or get a point across, then that politics version of it needs to kind of, if you hit on it, needs to be very lightly hit on and then backed away, I think.
Yeah.
So, or even left, in your pocket, so to speak.
Yeah. And I just like to finish about like kind of how I made the mistake of, coming on that maybe a little too hard. I used to, post to Facebook and kind of my discontentment against that kind of thing. And the thing is that even though I think it helped, like there's a lot of people from the college who are like, man, thank you for, saying things that just like they felt like they didn't have a voice to say, or they felt intimidated that, it's just good to have someone be able to voice how they feel. And that really just like motivated me. But I found out, the best way to express discontentment is to approach the people that are in charge, face to face, talk face to face, and express it that way in a respectful manner. So
like how I confronted a person correctly. Actually, it was here, and there were some people. There's been some moments in student ministry here that I've looked back on over the years, and I've gone, man, we have come a long way. So basically, just to kind of open it up, we had some students that were bullying other students, and I had to, just to kind of give a roundabout way, is we had some bullying going on, and I don't like bullying. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. If I understand that there's bullying going on, I try to snip it in the butt and making sure that doesn't happen. And I very calmly but graciously wished the student the best and said, look, this can't happen anymore. So basically that's where I kind of took a stand and made a decision that needed to happen. And I feel like God has blessed the student ministry with that choice. I still pray for that student every single day, and making sure that I pray for his soul, and I pray for where he's at, and I hope the best for him. And then that's not what we wish would happen. That's not what outcome, but sometimes in ministry and sometimes in life, we have to give this kind of tough love almost. So yeah.
And confrontation is never easy.
No.
It's not anything that should be easy. I guess you should always weigh it and make sure that you're doing it appropriately. And a lot of times it does have to do with correction. Sometimes it's standing up for yourself or for someone else. There's another verse I want to read here, Galatians 6:1-2. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, you may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Mm-hmm. So I think if you have kind of a mindset to where you're going in to make sure that you're trying to restore someone gently, I think that's the key with confrontation. Mm-hmm. So I've never shied away from it. I've always been a person who's stood up for myself, and when confrontation comes my way, it's never a worry for me. And I know that's not the same way with everybody, but in the same token, I have to make sure that I'm not heavy-handed when I come back around, and I need to confront someone as well. But we're going to discuss confrontation a little bit more here after the break.
Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. We're on fire, burning bridges. We don't have plans on crossing back again. Come on and spell it out. Put the words in our mouth if it is what it is.
So again, today we're talking about confrontation, and we just want to kind of switch into the gears of how you should, if you should, why you should confront people, and possibly why you shouldn't confront people. So I mentioned before the break of seek out to restore people gently, if you can think of it that way. So think of it how God sees us. And when God needs to, if you will, confront us, do you want God to bring forth his whole entire wrath upon you when you've made a mistake? I would hope not. So in the same token, when we need to confront someone else, let's throw a whole lot of grace in there, for one. So when we go to that person and we need to, I guess I can share one anecdote to where I was confronted, and I had a lot of respect for my wife for doing this. So we have a men's ministry here called Fight Club, and it's taken very, 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 very loosely from the movie, but it's more about like fighting for your family and everything like that. But the movie is not a very good movie. Morally, it's a very morally bankrupt movie. So I'm in no way or shape or form advocating the movie. But as a troubled and stupid youth, my friends and I watched that movie, and I was going to a different church at the time. I wasn't really in a great relationship with God. It was kind of a passing acquaintance with God at that point. And we decided that we were going to start our own fight club in the church. And one Saturday night, my friend whose dad was on staff at the church had a key. So we went into the youth room, and we proceeded to beat each other up because apparently it's something that they do in the movie. It's this weird secular way of like tearing yourself down so that you don't have anything to lose or something, I guess. I don't know. I was in a really stupid place. And I was dating my wife at the time, and I told her what we were doing, and she was like, "You're crazy. This is stupid, and you're doing something wrong." So I have a lot of respect for her in that sense because here I was just kind of a misguided youth, and I didn't really have like the deep relationship with Christ that I do now. And it was just funny because it's something that I'm sure was very hard for her to do because we were dating, and she wanted to make sure that she wasn't like, rubbing me the wrong way or making me angry. But in the same token, she cared about me and was like, "Hey, you're doing something dumb and you're going to get hurt, so you should probably quit." So do it that way. Do it in a way that where you're thinking about it when you're proceeding to talk to that person. And if you're too hot, if you're too angry, don't do it right now. Mm-hmm. Don't do it in that moment of anger where you're going to say something stupid or you're going to do something stupid. You wait because God's timing will allow things to be okay. Whatever you need to confront that person on probably won't, matter if you resolve it right now or if you wait an hour to cool down. So approach it in a way that you're restoring gently. And then once you've talked to that person, if there isn't a discourse, if there's not a diplomatically, nice solution for it where both people are agreeable and there's still a lot of heat and a lot of confrontation, don't be afraid to back away from that either. I likened it to car buying sometimes when you go to a dealership and they want to really sell you a car at like an astronomically larger value than what the car is probably worth. and you're trying to haggle a price down, there's a lot of confrontation and negotiation that's involved with that. And you have to be okay with walking away for a minute, or maybe permanently. If that person just isn't reasonable and they're trying to get you to buy something you can't afford, sometimes you just need to walk away. So keep that in mind when you're doing it as a negotiation, when you're trying to work things out with whoever you're trying to confront. And I think maybe even a step before this, a prequel, a preamble to all of this really should be, should you confront? So maybe we could chat about that here for just a second. When you're looking at a problem, is it your business, for one? Is it something that directly affects you? And I think a lot of people put on this badge of, well, I care about you, so I'm going to go confront you. And it really may not be your problem to fix. Maybe God's already working something way more amazing than you and your words are ever going to fix. So you have to kind of be mindful of that, right? You guys think that?
I was going to add too, if you're emotionally driven, like if you're connected directly, or if they are, a party that is getting that you're confronting, or like if it directly correlates to you, or you're a third party in the situation, and you're emotionally driven, no matter if you said it earlier, if you're angry, it goes further than that. If you're emotionally driven, if you're confronting somebody that is bullying somebody or something like that, and you're emotionally driven to make it a point to make a to confront that person, it's probably better for you to kind of back away, gather your thoughts, and then pull that person aside and not publicly humiliate them.
Yeah. Don't let your sense of justice ruin a potential relationship with this person.
Right, exactly.
Or their relationship with Christ, for that matter, if you're a minister.
And then on top of that, huge amounts of grace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's hard to think clearly when your emotions are high, and I think my emotions run pretty high, and I have a pretty high threshold, I think, for that, and just because I'm a really driven and passionate person about things, and a lot of people that know me kind of know that, and especially just in college, and my wife definitely knows that, and it's just being able to kind of control it and kind of pull back when I know I need to. Mm-hmm. And leading with grace is something that I've been told that really helps in the whole kind of confrontations and that whole idea that you kind of brought up, that we don't want God to put his full wrath on us if we mess up, in our time. And it's like, you just always got to think, how can I be more Christ-like or like God? And I know we're human. None of us are perfect. Sure. And sometimes we do make mistakes. And even if we're doing something out of the right mindset or from the right place in our heart, we always have to kind of take a step back and kind of evaluate the situation. You got to think, not only why am I doing this? Is it to try to prove a point? Is it just to try to kind of tear someone down? Is it to try to help them? Or just, like Joe said, even if you're trying to help them, you need to understand, look, is it you that needs to help them, or is it something that God is working on in the background in their life? And it's hard, and we're gonna mess up. Because if we deeply care about people, it's hard to not want to have to step into their world and have all these different ideas. And I know we're kind of watching, JJ and I are watching the show, This Is Us, and it kind of shows Randall, and he's in a place now where he sees all these hurting people in these poor neighborhoods, and he just wants to step right in and run for some kind of government office or mayor or something. But
speaking of voting,
but he's just so adamant about helping these people that he just goes into their neighborhood, and the place that he didn't grow up in. He's not really a part of it. He grew up kind of just in a more wealthy family or situation because he was adopted. But there's a whole lot of different aspects to this as well, to this story. But a lot of people there don't respect him just because he's an outsider trying to come in and trying to just insert his viewpoints and his ideas that he thinks is going to help them. But the people there don't really receive it that way.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I think a lot of people treat Christians that way too, where they this goody hoity-toity Christian's going to come in here and fix my problems, and they don't want anything to do with it, and they get all upset. So it's in the same token, he comes from a nicer family and isn't, they're like, what do you know of this?
Exactly.
That you haven't suffered like we've suffered. And when you're suffering, I don't know if you've heard the term misery loves company, but it's very true. And when you're not in misery and you're trying to be in company with people that are miserable, they're not super happy about that. So it's funny, like right along those same lines with that.
Yeah.
So we'll leave you with this. Please, as a reminder, when you're going to confront, if you feel that it is your responsibility to do so, if you're directly involved, etc., then please do it in a way that you're trying to be gentle, you're trying to lift that person up, you're trying to salvage a relationship. And for crying out loud, please pray about it first.
Right. Pray about it. Yes.
I can't count how many times I've talked to people who are like, I'm going to go, but have you prayed about this? Well, why would I do that? Yeah. Well, and it took me, honestly, a long time to get to that point. And there's even still sometimes where I kind of forget that crucial step, because sometimes God's like, hey, I got this. I've got a way better solution than you could ever think of. Don't worry about it. But man, I can't count how many times I've talked to people who are hot about something, and it's like they haven't thought to pray about it. So just pray about it, pray about it. And then if it's still something you feel like you should be doing, come in with a gentle heart and a restorative spirit, and just get in there and try and salvage what you can. So anyway, but thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
All right. See you.
See you guys.
Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. Let your yes be yeah, and you know be nah. We're on fire, burning bridges. We don't have plans on crossing back again.